Welcome to Premium Cashflow Real Estate Investing Podcast with Sakar Cowley. During this program, you will hear guest experts sharing their experiences, best practices, and market insights. We discuss investing in multifamily apartment complexes and how a busy professional can passively invest hassle-free in various opportunities. Your host, Sakar Cowley, owns millions of dollars of assets and has done thousands of value-add projects over 20 years now. So listen in for insights. Here's your host, Sakar Cowley.
Welcome to another edition of Premium Cashflow Podcast. I'm your host, Sakar Cowley. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Edward Orasi. Edward Orasi is with Keller Williams, as you can see the nice background here. Ed has been involved in real estate throughout his entire life. He grew up, his childhood was with mom, managing different properties of hers. So he knew intimately what the tenants, the renovations, and, coming to commercial, he likes to say that he evaluated pretty much the cap rates and all the contract negotiations, like pretty much as he was growing up. So it's natural to him. Today, he's a commercial broker based in Las Vegas. So we are going to today hear some of the nuances or some of the grandeur vision of Las Vegas that's happening. So I'm very excited personally to welcome him and hear a lot of things that he has to share. So thank you for taking time, Ed. I'd really appreciate you joining today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So Ed, give us a background on all the different things that you have done and how you came along in the multifamily real estate.
Okay. So like you said, I've been in real estate most of my life. My mom owned several properties throughout South Florida, originally from Miami. Got into real estate in 2003 when real estate was popping and everybody wanted to get into real estate. So I got into it. Actually fell into it because my wife had already been licensed for several years. Mm-hmm. In 2007, we moved to Vegas to have my wife, who's an only child, closer to her mother and stuff because they lived in Vegas. Mm-hmm. Relicensed out here, started selling, sold residential on a team that I joined out here. And we started using my knowledge of commercial that I did in Florida and expanding it out here. In Florida, we had done some condo conversions and stuff, so I kind of knew how to plan the multifamily part of it.
Sure.
And since we've been here, since I left the team and went on my own and built my own team, we sold the resort of Mount Charleston, a 64-unit historical hotel. Mm-hmm. We've sold over 100 doors in Vegas, currently listing about 110 doors. So we're getting definitely more into the multifamily because there's a huge rush from California with the new laws and rent controls moving over here. So
Sure. Good. Thank you. And Ed, like you've seen it all. You've seen so many investors come and go. You've seen a lot of listings as well. And before we got started, you were sharing with me that how active the Las Vegas market is still. We are still in the midst of sort of the COVID pandemic. Some states have been slowly opening. I know Las Vegas, as you indicated, has also opened recently, but still the market is still thriving. There isn't any breaks or any bumps in the market based on what you described. Give us a sense to our viewers as to what the market is shaking up and how the deal velocity is right now.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So we were one of the few lucky states that our position as realtors and real estate agents was considered essential. So we were still able to operate. We were just operated on a limited scale with showings and some of the restrictions on open houses and things of that nature. But we were still operating. So like I shared with you earlier, today, as of today, in the last 7 days, we have over 1,500 listings that went active in the last 7 days. We've had about the same number, 1,500 of go under contract and about 700 closings. While it's lower than it is typically, mm-hmm. It's still very active, and it's still keeping. And since we're still keeping the same number relatively listings to under contract, our inventories continue to be tight. So it is an active market. People are looking all the time. When you get into the commercial, I've got probably 7 clients that we're working with, all the way from small business owners growing their business through this pandemic. People actually expanding into additional locations. And the multifamily is just because of the influx from California, because of their rules with
all the rent
control. The rent control. Yeah, they're just coming over, and they're starting to look at Vegas and realizing there's value in purchasing in Vegas.
I see. Now, Ed, one thing I have observed all the time for the last several quarters now is that Vegas has such a dramatic increase in percentages of rent increases. It's phenomenal. Could you maybe help us understand why Vegas is on such a run up in terms of the viability in the market, where you would sort of think that coming out of a COVID pandemic, where we know that a lot of short-term rentals or the tourism industry in general got really smacked. But here you have, besides the COVID pandemic, I should say, you had several quarters of, positive rent growth, or a record rent growth, I should say. What's driving all this growth?
Well, the positive growth on the rental I think is coming from the influx of just the general public and diversifying the community. So we're getting other businesses in Vegas. We had Las Vegas Knights for 2 years. We're getting the Raiders this year, the first year they're playing here. We just got an American hockey expansion team in Henderson. So we have all these positions to start filling, and the exodus from California, because it's getting very expensive. Sure. We're an attractive state because we don't have a state sales tax. And as far as the tourism, we're such an iconic place for tourism that when the casinos announced the opening, the larger casino groups were only going to open 2 casinos. Prior to opening, they had to add an additional casino and had each of them open 3 because of the amount of activity they had over the 2 openings.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So you suddenly have a sort of a flood of sorts that it requires you to, requires the business owners to open more doors and things like that, is I think what I'm hearing. And also, Ed, going back to the positive record rent growth that we had, are there a lot of corporations that are moving in, and any other activity that's happening you can point out to?
Yes. So we have Switch, the technology company, they have an office here. I believe they have 2 now.
I see.
So they're bringing in more technology-based people. So as you and I were speaking about, there's a little bit of a diversity going in Vegas.
Sure.
They're trying to bring in more businesses and change the face of Vegas and not make it 100% dependent on tourism.
Sure. And thank you for bringing that up also, Ed, is that I know in general, the market perception is that Vegas is always tourism based. That's kind of when anyone says Vegas, boom, you imagine the casinos, the parties, the pools, that's the big fountains and whatnot, right? That's the grandeur vision of Vegas. But here you are describing, as you shared earlier with me, is the 2045 vision that the city planners have, that sort of diversifies Vegas, opening into many different sectors and not depending on sort of the one pony tourism. Could you maybe share some details more and go sort of more granular into it?
Sure. So the 2045 vision of Vegas kind of came about when Amazon was looking for a second headquarters, and unfortunately we didn't get it.
Sure.
So the leaders got together and say, okay, if somebody wants to build a second headquarters, we want to be the place, because the only thing we have is Vegas is hot in the summer, but we really don't have snow days. We really don't have hurricanes because there's no water around us. So we don't have reasons that companies have to shut down. So we're ideal as a community to bring in a headquarters, because you can keep your employees all year round working. There's no shutdowns.
Sure.
So as far as weather and climate, we were great, but we didn't have diversity. So we have to figure out how to get diversity. So our leaders got together and said, okay, let's set a plan and let's put a date to it, because a plan without a date doesn't give you a destination.
Sure.
So they put it together. And so what they're doing is they're dividing the actual city of Las Vegas into quadrants. They're putting a medical quadrant to bring in more doctors and more residencies to help boost some of the medical systems here and to work with that. They're also doing a technology quadrant to boost that industry. Even though we have a very healthy UNLV hospitality portion and law, we're starting to now work both of those quadrants as well, because we want to bring in more professionals. They want to bring in more people that are at higher education levels and that can now buy homes. And then when something like this happens, like the pandemic that happened, you're not, 30% unemployment, because that's everybody's in a casino. You want to be able to say, well, we're only at 15%, which is still a lot. But if something like this ever happened again, be able to say we're lower because we're diversified. We have people here that do other things.
Sure. Now, 2045 ad seems, almost 25 years out, right? Like, what sort of concrete steps that the city is taking? Like, is it something, let's say acquiring of land, or, if there are existing houses, eminent domain or things like that, or are there any infrastructure level improvements that are happening, or perhaps some of the other negotiations from a like a contract and leasing standpoint that you're trying to talk to big corporations, or rezoning the land for entire economic zone or things like that. Could you maybe share some details, some of that concrete activity that may be happening right now?
Yeah, so they are negotiating land because they need to actually grow what we have to be able to accommodate these new sectors. Also, they're working in steps. So we're doing like the downtown phase now. So we're trying to revitalize downtown, make it more of an attractive appeal. Tony Shea with Zappos was the one that started this whole downtown revitalization. And now you have investors going in there and saying, okay, let's buy a building, let's fix it up. We can rent and make it a place where people want to walk around downtown.
I see.
So they're revitalizing, and then they're going in segments. So it's a little slower because they're actually trying to say, okay, if we move into this, then how can we fix this neighborhood? How can we give money to the investors and say, okay, if you fix this, we'll give you X amount of dollars to renovate it and make it look nice and have people want to move into these areas. And so I know it's a long time away. It's 25 years away, but the process is slow because they want to get it right. They don't want to rush through it, get it up, and then it doesn't sustain.
Right. And these things are not, as dramatic as we are talking, right? These are not something you can just suddenly achieve in 5 years. It's just not realistic, There's a lot of infrastructure planning, acquisition of land and things like that have to happen to attract the industries, and things like that. So it's definitely a long-term plan. But I appreciate you sharing that detail, Ed. It's something that I think all the viewers and listeners should definitely, look forward to it. And I'm personally gonna pretty much mark the Las Vegas as a red hot area in my personal book and start looking at deals as well. Now, moving on, Ed, you indicated that you obviously do a lot of deals and things like that, and I would like to, sort of just do a role play of sorts here. Is that, let's say I am a buyer coming to you, right? And you are a seller's broker, right? And I don't know what I don't know, but things that are in the OM that perhaps, are simplified or may not be, as accurate as you would like, right? So give us a sort of a reverse overview of things of sorts that something better than the buyer and something better than the seller as well, that what could be simplified in a operating memorandum, right? So walk us through how does that come into play, or what, from a buyer's perspective, what buyers should be careful about when you're looking into the OMs or in the realm of multifamily properties?
So a great question. So what I think you want to look into is, when they provide numbers.
Sure.
Diving deep into the numbers is what everybody should do that's going to buy. Are the rentals, when they're giving you an OM and they're saying, well, this is our yearly revenue. Well, I want it broken down for the last 12 months. And when I say broken down for the last 12 months, I want the last 12 months individually so I can look at the numbers. I personally ask for per unit. I don't want gross numbers. I want to see per unit what exactly you collected, So I can see on a balance sheet, was it collected, was it not? How many rents were paid, were not paid? And we can dive into those numbers because that helps our negotiation on the buy side. And on the sales side, I just want to be fully transparent and make sure that my seller provides the right information to people. We also want to look at expenses. You know, if they pay water, there should be some usage that you can average out. How much is, so we want to make sure that the properties are, the meters and even the power meters, if there's meters that are being used by the building owner, we'd love to have that separated because you want to make sure what is actually the usage for the building. Because sometimes, you know, they could have a water leak and not to say that owners aren't looking for that, but sometimes it gets missed. So if, you know, we want to call during the due diligence, call and verify, hey, are there any open permits that haven't been closed? Are there any issues with the building that the building has been fined for something? Is there, call the utilities, hey, what's the average for a building this size in the neighborhood, the usage of utilities? So you can kind of gauge an idea of when you're making an offer or when you're doing your due diligence, you're getting as much information as possible. Because the worst thing is buying a building, whether it's a $400,000 fourplex or a $5 million multiplex, and not have all of the information.
Sure. And so you are basically saying that, Ed, is dig into the numbers, know exactly what the utilities are costing, if there is anything else in terms of, public utility versus, what tenant should be paying and things like that, right? So now also you see a lot of sellers and the market activity, Ed. Help us understand what the deal velocity is right now. Are there a lot of sellers looking to sell properties in general, or has the COVID pandemic slowed things down?
So we're seeing a lot of activity as far as just in general, people want to list. The multifamily units have been a little slower to list, but the activity to buy has been much higher.
I see.
So you know that we know traditionally in anything you do, when the supply is low and the demand is high, it's going to drive prices up.
Absolutely.
One of the things and that is unique to Vegas is when 08 hit and through 12 and everything was up in the air and people didn't know what they were doing. You had a lot of savvy investors come into Vegas and say, I'm just going to start buying up fourplexes, sevenplexes, 20s. I'm buying all these units up and bought them really, really cheap. Put people in there that were paying rent and have been solid. So there's a great opportunity now to go in and look for these. And yes, you're going to be paying a little bit higher. Maybe your cap rate will be at a 4 when you buy, but do the research and there's huge potential to increase rates. So to add value to it. And then you can get it up to a 6 or 7 because now you've added the value.
Sure.
And another issue is a lot of Vegas, because of just the way Vegas is, it's kind of a small town.
Sure.
It's a medium-sized town with a small town mentality. We have a lot of owners that do self-management. All my investors, I strongly suggest they go through a professional property manager. So when we get numbers and we get everything and you sell in the future, now it's more valuable because now you have concrete numbers of what you've collected and what you've spent. And it's done by an independent person. So
got it. Now you said also that, there's so much activity right now and with the opportunity zone designation that you have in many places in Vegas, are you seeing a lot of new construction or different type of activity also happening in Vegas?
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of assemblies. So we're seeing people that are saying, okay, I'm going to buy this lot now. Ed, do me a favor. See if we can buy the next 4 lots over.
Interesting.
So now they can knock all those old buildings down and build something newer and build something higher, build something more modern. And then we're seeing a lot of activity. So Henderson, which is right down the street from Vegas, is the hotbed right now for Airbnbs.
I see.
So we're seeing that Vegas is, so there's a misconception that in Vegas you can't do them. And that's not the case. You can do them in Vegas. There's just a couple little hurdles you need to jump to get it done. But Henderson is the hotbed for that because they're openly saying, hey, come on in, Airbnbs, we're ready to go. Here are the guidelines, do what you got to do. North Las Vegas is actually working on that as well. So we are seeing a lot of assembly. We are seeing some of the turn towards the Airbnbs. to try to create more activity. And we're seeing a lot of the older stuff get rehabbed, get looking nice. I mean, everybody's trying to do that because they're getting into opportunity zones. So with the tax deferment, you have to spend a certain amount of money to fix it up. But we're seeing a lot of that, which is good for the economy and good for the city of Vegas.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ed. It's been a pleasure. I think knowing the pulse of Vegas as to what's happening. You're the go-to person. I appreciate you coming on. Please share with our listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. So the easiest way is my email address, which is ed@orasigroup.com. Orasi is ORASI group.com. You can also text me at 702-860-7087. If anybody would like a copy of the 2045 plan that Vegas has, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to share with everybody so they can kind of see what's going on.
Awesome. So it's been a pleasure. All the viewers and listeners can head on to premiumcashflow.com as well. There we have a ton of articles and news media, of course, the podcast interviews like experts like Ed who come on there on a weekly basis. There also we have, if you're interested to know various opportunities that you may have, kindly go ahead and register yourself using Invest With Us button. And we are always, willing and welcome the new viewers and listeners, and we can jump on a brief phone call to know your goals and opportunities. And, we can certainly work with you and find some more, investment deals if that's what your focus is. So thank you, Ed. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to, sort of having you in future as well and kind of seeing and knowing the progress within Vegas itself.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Premium Cashflow Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at premiumcashflow.com to sign up for weekly updates, research articles, and more. We will see you again for another great interview with an expert guest.